So he joined me here for the fourth round of this season's ZRL, and this time we're on the Innsbruckring for a 3-lap scratch race. This is a race I was really quite looking forward to. I absolutely love this route. It's the type of route that, if you're more kind of anaerobic or sprinter, sort of that type of power profile, a lot of riders can get over the leg snapper climb. But it just really helps kind of sort of split that group up. And it really is the case that you have to really dig in quite hard to make sure that you try and survive the climb and stay in that front group. But it really does animate just that kind of short climb there, just being in the position that it is really. So if it was a sort of a standard type B race that I might be in, even quite a high level B race, the likelihood is that I know I'd be able to survive that climb, and I would be able to be there and actually feature at the end. But obviously this isn't a standard, even a high level B group. It is the A division, which is well above what I can usually survive. But I was given the opportunity to ride in this team here in this league, and I sort of felt that it was something that if I wanted to try and improve, that I should take that opportunity. That would mean that obviously it was going to be very, very difficult to actually survive that climb, or I was going to have to dig extremely deeply in order to actually still be there and be able to feature at the end. Just for sort of reference, in a lot of sort of B races, the actual climbing time of the KOM, the leg snapper, would often be around maybe 45 seconds, roughly. In this race, we're probably looking at more like 38. And as it actually happens, every single ascent is around the 38 second to mark, pretty much spot on. It was going to be very, very difficult. But thankfully, with it being a scratch race, there's no benefit for riders to kind of really push on extremely hard on that climb. I mean, we knew it was going to be hard. It always is, because there's almost a fear that comes into people that they go in to get dropped. So everyone always kind of just expects a max effort. So it really just is a case of kind of giving it all you've got. And there were 3 laps. So for myself, and probably for everyone else really, that was almost 3 little mini finish lines, that it was just a case of trying to survive one, and there's checkpoint 1 complete on lap 1, lap 2 again, trying to survive it the second time, and then finally the third time I'm kind of onto that sprint. I didn't know how I was going to fare, to be honest. I've been a little bit unwell over the last couple of weeks, and it's still it has cleared, but it's still kind of sitting there a little bit. So I was just hoping that I could dig in and basically give it the best that I could. Something that I was hoping was that actually the group was going to take it fairly steadily between the climbs. I knew that this was right at the very, very upper limit of something that I would potentially be able to survive and feature in. And what I really personally didn't want to happen is that I knew that I probably didn't have the legs to be able to survive guys pushing it kind of on the flat, trying to split the group up, survive that and survive the climb. I knew that I perhaps had potential to kind of survive the climb maybe a couple of times, because the effort is short enough that it kind of does lend itself slightly more towards sort of my sort of stronger end then, which are your shorter efforts. But what I didn't want is what we've got here, which is people kind of pushing quite hard on the flat, because then you're kind of needing to make those efforts throughout the lap, which is taken away from what you might have left in your legs. I mean, I was up over 400 watts there. The heart rate's climbing up into the 180s. So it was something that these type of efforts were kind of concerning me this early on, that it would really sap what was needed in the legs. Something else that was a bit of a disappointment, I mean, there were 3 power-ups available on this course. You had the feather, the aero. Feather, brilliant for the climb, and the aero is obviously useful for potentially after the climb, just getting back on that slight descent. But the Ghost, it's a pretty useless power-up, to be honest. It's not a power-up that a lot of people like. And the only real use for that in the race would be right at the finish line. Basically, if somebody's going for the finish, it's of no use whatsoever at any other point in the race. There's no points on either of the segments here. If there were points, maybe the Ghost is valid, because riders might use the Ghost and try and break away kind of early on. But in this race, scratch race, it's of absolutely no use whatsoever. And unfortunately, I picked up a Ghost for the first power-up banner. So I didn't have a feather, ideally a feather, to try and help a little bit on that climb. The effort has slowed slightly, but it did. I could really feel it in my legs. I mean, it pushed the heart rate up to kind of high 180s. But luckily, probably about a kilometre before the start of that KOM, it has backed off slightly. There's a small breakaway up the road. One of our teammates, Carston's in the breakaway. Extremely strong rider. And I think they probably got around about 5 seconds. And there was the potential that they could very well stay away. But I think we do catch them just as we head onto the leg snapper here. We do actually bring them back. So you're on this kind of cobbled section here with a golden roof, taking a turn, and something that we had spoken about kind of beforehand, a bit of a tactic here to try and assist you in getting up the KOM, up the leg snapper, is on this flatter section on the bridge to actually kind of push a little bit harder, maybe from the middle to the back of the pack, to just kind of use the draft of the riders and actually pick up a little bit of speed. I mean, you can see my speed increasing there along the flat, and what that's doing is it's just giving you that little speed increase as you come through the draft of the riders just before you get onto the steeper section. So you're already kind of moving forward at a slightly higher speed before the kind of the gradient of the climb kind of really kicks in. Okay, so it's giving it a big effort here. It's kind of well over 11 watts per kilo. And it stays at pretty much 11 watts per kilo, or just a shade under, for the entirety of the climb. I am in kind of 12th, 13th position going up. So that was something that I was sort of quite happy with. And a little key section here is just as you go across the top, giving it a little kick just down the other side, just to stay and get the speed up high again, to just stay in touch. It was a really big effort. Heart rate's up at 206, which is extremely high. Really, really hard effort. But I was over the other side. You can see in the mini-map how strung out the group is. I was over the other side of the first time up the KOM, kind of in the top 10, which was ideal. That gave me plenty of sliding room. The heart rate's still very high, and there's that little kicker there sort of halfway down, so just another little putting out another little bit of power. But it gave me a little bit of sliding room here, that I was over the climb, and I could just kind of ease off and just try and bed myself back into the group and get as much recovery as I possibly could. Again, I was hoping that this pack would just come back together, nobody would want to attack, and actually it would we'd be able to get a nice little bit of rest. And for me, I was now thinking, right, well, that's checkpoint number 1 done. I've survived the first time up, survived that kind of first selection. There was a small group of riders just got tailed off there, so our pack broke up. I think we were around 35 to 40 riders in the front here, so we'd lost maybe 15 or so the first time up the climb, but I had made it, so I'd kind of achieved something I'd wanted to achieve. Now, it was still be in this group at this point. It was now just a kind of a case of doing the minimum work that I possibly could, and I just needed to try and get a bit of recovery, get the heart rate back down, keep drinking. I always put a bit of carbohydrate, mix in my bottle, keep drinking, get the fluids in, and just kind of rest as best as possible, and try and go again. I did pick up a feather power up there, so that will, I decided I'll keep that. That should come in quite handy for the next time up the KOM. Okay, so just skipped forward a few minutes. Nothing of note happened. It stayed nice and calm, and I did manage to get a nice bit of recovery in, so my heart rate just dropped down nicely down into low 160s, which for me is high for some people, but for me that's well below threshold. I've got quite a high heart rate, but the race here does start getting quite animated. Just as we went through the start-finish banner, a few riders must have had, or they did have, aero power-ups, probably from one of either the KOM banner or from the sprint banner, and a couple of them activated them just as we went across, and you can see the group is really stringing out here. So there's a few riders, quite a big group of riders actually. There's one guy who's got a really good lead, and there's another couple of riders that are just kind of dropping off the front of our group here, who are going really hard to try and make a breakaway. It was, again, as I said earlier, it was something that I was kind of thinking, oh no, just made that huge effort to kind of stay in this group. And then there's that possibility, because I haven't got a particularly good sort of sustained power over a longer period of time, like that sort of 20-minute power that you need to kind of help you, just that sort of big power engine just to chug along in a sort of a breakaway type group. So you can just make it out there on the mini map. There's a group that have split off the front. There was a couple of our team in it, so that was really good. They've got a few seconds. It's around about 11 riders that have kind of got away. And I got to be honest, at this point, I was thinking I didn't have the legs to kind of go across that gap. I mean, the heart rate's, what is it? It's 186 now. The power is up in the kind of 400 or 500s here to try and do a little bit of an effort to help close it. So I could try and contribute a little bit at the front of our group, trying to close it. 400 odd watts. It's like 6 point something watts a kilo. I just sort of briefly went up to there to try and assist some of the guys in this kind of what's almost becoming a chase back to close. But there was no way I could go across that gap on my own. Thankfully, a few other riders also came to the front, put in little hard digs. I mean, the heart rate, again, I keep going on about my heart rate, but it's up at 192 now. So a really hard effort that I really didn't really want to have to make on the sort of flat here, with the kind of the aim or the need then to try and survive that leg snapper. Just as we head onto the bridge, after a couple of minutes of what it did at one point look like quite a promising breakaway of sort of maybe 11 riders, the groups do reform. So thankfully we come back together and the groups are reformed, and I thought, right, okay, excellent, time to again back off and just get as much recovery as I can, get that heart rate down, try and get a bit of life back into the legs before we take on that leg snapper again. However, that wasn't to be, because pretty much straight away another group of riders kicked hard and are trying to break away here. So this was something, again, it's good training because the heart rate and the effort's already there. There's loads of lactic built up in the legs, but the need now to kind of go again and just try and follow this group. At this point, there's no way that I was ever going to be able to contribute to the chasing on the front, a little bit like I did last time. It was a case of me just trying to stay. I am towards the back of the pack here, but I just needed to kind of stay in the wheels and hope that this group didn't split. I mean, if this had split in position, sort of halfway down this stretched out pack, I was going to be on the wrong side of it. But at this point, I didn't have it in me to be able to do anything other than just try and follow what was in front of me. So I tried following the riders in front of me, and I was just kind of hoping that that sort of almost that concertina effect, I suppose, of the pack stretching out and just coming back together. And thankfully it did, reasonably quickly after. It has kind of come back together. But we are a matter of probably a minute or so from hitting the base of that KOM again. So there really isn't a great deal of time to back off and try and get a little bit of recovery in. It was just a case of basically doing what I can. We go along the road here, and then it takes that left just after the cobbled street section, and we'll be onto that climb again. I think there is actually only one rider out front. I can't remember, I have to be honest, I can't remember off the top of my head whether that was Carsten from our team again. I think it might have been, because one of the other guys said on Discord about how our actual pack here had really backed off. So if he was going to be able to make a breakaway, it might have been a really good time to have actually pushed on, because actually the pack had backed right down and really slowed up. Going on to the climb here, and I have to be honest, or just before we go into the climb, I was much more concerned this time about me actually being able to survive it. This entire lap to this point had actually been quite full on, with the initial the bigger breakaway, and then that smaller breakaway then straight after. It had been really quite a high powered lap. But that same tactic again of, as I got onto the bridge, just kicking a bit harder to try and raise a bit of speed, and use a little bit of the draft of the group on the flatter section to just to increase my speed, get my avatar moving forward. So as we hit the climb, you're moving through the riders rather than kind of being stuck on the back of them. This time had a feather, so I activated the feather just as the road got steeper and just kind of dug in. Again, we're looking at high 10 watts per kilo into the 11s. I think it was 11.8 maybe there. But I was thinking to myself, oh, it's good. I'm actually in the top maybe 5 riders here going across the top of the KOM, which maybe I could have done a little bit less effort, been slightly further down the group and still actually made it across. But I was sort of concerned about actually being there, so I kind of was treating every ascent of the KOM kind of as my finish line. So it was more important just actually make it, be there, and then kind of consider sort of backing off. So again, I'm kind of at the front of this group, just trying to sit in the wheels, back the power off, and get as much recovery as it's possible to do on this descent, and really hope that on this lap kind of nobody pushes on, because I knew that I actually didn't have that in my legs to do again. I couldn't do another lap like that. I just about managed to survive this time out, and we probably lost another couple of riders off the back of the pack, but that stretched out group has again come back together. I got a ghost on the descent, so I burnt that with the hope of actually picking up something a little bit more useful at the sprint banner. So I've chopped a chunk out, the bulk of that lap, because in all honesty, nothing really happened. The group, thankfully, kept it really gentle. There were there's a couple of little breakaway attempts here, and they've literally just happened. A couple of guys trying to go off the front before the climb, but really nothing of note happened. The group stayed nice and sort of easy. But something that I noticed about me personally is that my heart rate didn't really drop down. So even though the effort was comparatively to the first and the second lap was a lot easier, my heart rate didn't actually drop. It stayed up in the 180s and high 170s despite the actual power having dropped down. So that kind of I really then knew that I was right on the limit. So we got onto the climb. Luckily I'd picked up another featherweight power up, so I try and use that. So yet again we're up well over 11 watts per kilo on the base, but I already know I am really struggling. If we compare this to the first 2 times up the climb, I was in the top 10 on the first 2 climbs. This time I'm down towards 20th position, and I can just feel those riders starting to creep away from me. as we got onto the second half. So I just made sure here, and this was something I was quite happy of when I've kind of reflected on it, because this is a point where I could have been distanced. Just gave it a really hard kick. It had to go really, really deep there again, but just gave it that little kick across the top. The last couple of maybe 100 meters of the climb, there was a risk that I was going to get distanced. So I gave it a little kick over the top, and I did manage to just get on the tail of that group going over. Something that I got wrong a few weeks back when we had to climb on the Ocean Lava Cliffside Loop is just as I was starting to get distanced, I didn't kick hard enough to actually get my avatar up to speed, so it would kind of catch the draft of the riders. So that was something that I was keen to not make the same error here again. So even though I was really, really deep, I mean, you can see it on the camera there, the effort was really, really difficult. I did manage to find that extra couple of seconds where I thought, right, if I go sort of deeper here now, just to get that avatar up to speed, catch a draft of the riders, that'll make it hopefully an easier effort in the long term rather than almost trying to pace back on. When I was talking to Howell Davis just about how maybe I got it wrong on the first and what could I have done different on the Ocean Lava Cliffside Loop a few weeks back. Just as I got distance, and that's something that he said to me. He said you needed to have kicked a little bit harder there just to get up to speed, a shorter, sharper kick, to just kind of match the speed of the riders around. And in this instance, it worked. I could have got tailed off, but thankfully I've made it. So I'm in this front group, and I've actually got my first aero power up of the race. So I was quite happy with that. I was sort of looking forward to. I was really, really pleased that I'd survived those 3 climbs, and survived the attacks on the kind of first lap, and particularly the second lap. The second lap was quite a difficult lap, but I'd actually survived it, and I was here hopefully for the sprint finish. However, I knew that I wasn't feeling great. This third lap, the heart rate had remained high throughout. Even higher than the second lap, where actually the effort was a lot more. I was very, very close to being distanced that time on the leg snapper, and the sprint finish here does come really quickly after, and I just could feel that I wasn't recovering. Like there was no recovery coming back into me, and I was hoping the group wasn't going to attack too early. I think if it had gone at maybe 400 or 500 metres, I would have had a good chance of getting a solid result here. But it actually started at maybe 1.5k. This group started pulling, and I'm trying as hard as I can, but I can feel them going away from me. I just cannot, I haven't got it in me. Those 3 ascents of the leg snapper and the efforts that were put down, particularly in lap 2, have just really sapped the legs, and that was the limit that I had, and I can just feel, I mean, those last few, this last kind of K and a half, they're just pulling away from me, and I am trying. I am really giving it my kind of all, but that was just that one effort too much for me. I probably could have done a sprint. There was a sprint probably in me, but what I didn't have is the ability to kind of follow the wheels again, after having put in those kind of efforts that were really at the stretching me to the kind of the limit of what I'm kind of capable of. Those efforts to actually be there at the end had really stretched me kind of to the absolute limit of what I'm personally capable of. But that's part of the reason why when given the opportunity I wanted to kind of race in this division. It's a very, very strong A grade league. It's kind of well above the standard of a lot of the races that I've raced in, but that's part of the reason why I wanted to be here, was to really stretch myself. I think it was some quite sort of decent power there, and repeatedly I was quite proud that I managed to repeat the power, but unfortunately I just got tailed off at the end. but we'll be back next time for another go, and I can definitely feel myself improving, which is something that I'm really happy with.